Well, I guess we'll get started. I apologize to Doug, especially. We fossil people will typically walk through miles of rattlesnake infested grass, or dive with alligators or sharks, and I guess a little bit of rain, and they're scared they'll melt and not going to show up. So thanks to you folks who did come tonight. Show and tell. So we'd like to show up every month. We show what people are finding. So some people are willing to bring stuff in and show it off. Obviously, Doug Woodring didn't mind showing off some of his stuff here. He's got a two-sided display, so y'all haven't seen the other side. But Dr. Bob, you want to come up first?
Sure.
A man who needs no microphone, past president, board member, author of 3 books.
So I brought some stuff I found late January, early February, and then the one meeting I was plugging my new book, and then last month I forget what we had going on between Fossil Fest. So anyway, so I hadn't brought anything yet, but some people are familiar with the fact that I have a mammoth coming out of the Peace River, and it's been coming out for about 4 years. I have not found the business end, which means the skull or the jaws, unfortunately. But I got a ton of stuff, and the stuff that's coming out is really good quality. This is a calcaneum. It's a heel bone. So in a human, it's about the yo big, you know, so it kind of give you a little perspective. And the stuff that's coming out of there, it's just coming out in like really killer perfect condition. Occasionally there's something that has to get a little bit glued together or whatever. So I'll set that down here just for right this second so I can get the other 2 things out. I only brought 3 pieces. I found about 7 or 8 more pieces. I now have 61 bones of the mammoth. I don't know how many they have total. More than that, 61, and a whole bucket full of broken ribs. This is a thoracic vertebrae, so it's kind of in the middle, and that's the process. It would have had a little bit more of a knob on the end of it, so it's in pretty good shape. I have all my stuff is labeled or whatever. And the last one I brought with me this time is a, just so you can see the difference, this is a cervical vertebrae. It's a neck vertebrae. So, and again, it's in pretty good. It's missing a little bit off of this knob and a little bit of a knob there, and it would have had a little pointy thing on here. So, pretty good. This one actually came out 2 separate weeks. So this piece here came out separately, and I dry everything, label it or whatever, so I'm pretty compulsive, so I could look up when those pieces came out. So anyway, when we're done, if people want to come and take a look through, closer look, I will have them with me, sitting down here up front. So,
just real quick, how far are they separate when you found these pieces? I mean, like.
So I would say all 61 pieces of the mammoth are in a section no bigger than from, say, paw to the board to here, a square that big.
Wow.
But a lot of it is in a deep kind of sand. So I have a probe, and you probe through, and so you hit your dink dink, and you realize you're hitting it. And the thing with the probe, my probe is about 4 feet long, and if it's so when I hit something, I put my finger right at the probe where the sand level is, and I pull it out. And if it's that much, there's no way you're getting to it. It's just too deep of a sand. But if I hit and I'm like, oh, and I pull it out, and I've only got this much sand to go through that I can get to it. The problem with probing, and you think, how come it's taking so long? I'm not using any mechanical blowers or anything to get it out, so I'm taking my time. And the other thing, if you think about a 4-foot probe, you could put it in straight like this, and next time you put it in, even if you're on a slight angle, by the time you get to the end of the 4 feet, you're missing this thing. You know what I'm saying? Completely. Even though you probed, you know, one time the probe came in here, one time the probe came in there, because if it's that far down, it's really easy to miss these things. So a few years later, each year I go back during the season and reprobe that same area. The cervical vertebrae was just laying out, so it had washed out at some point. I don't know how and I want to say the thoracic vertebrae also was laying out. And then the calcaneum was under. I had the end of a radius I found this year, and some other stuff I found probing. So, any other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Bob.
Yep.
Mr. Appledorn.
If you're into crystallized clams, there's a place in Okeechobee. What is it?
Ruck's Pit?
Ruck's
Oh,
Pit.
that's what they still call it.
Yep. Look on Facebook. I don't know how much it costs. Somebody else paid for me. But the clams are coming out pretty nice. One of my good ones. And you have this one. And you got the metrics on the back, but then on the front where the shell had removed, nice spot. And then here's a piece, but you can see how much crystal is there. So I spent 2 days over there digging, so I just finally got through my 5 buckets of stuff. So
How far a drive is that down there? to where-
it's about a 2-hour drive to get from here to there.
And so, and they're not in the mining where they actually have spoil piles.
This is the stuff that he had taken out of whatever area that they had sold and piled it in, you know, a big slab. So this is all new stuff, hasn't been reworked yet, but half of that pile has already been looked through. And they'll probably mix it up again and then have people go in there and do that again. So get there because you can find some good stuff.
Thank you, Mr. Brandon, where you at? Want a microphone, brother?
I think I'm good. I also went to Peace River. I didn't find anything big, but which is what I usually look for, but I checked the little gravel bar that was just right on the bank, and after picking up a couple little tiny shark's teeth and thinking, oh, this might be a good place to go and check under that down log over there, I picked up what I thought was a fish bone, and it turned out to be a baby bobcat jaw, which is extremely rare to find juvenile cat, and this is about like a 6-month-old kitten maybe. So super sad that it died so young, but it makes for a really cool fossil.
You usually pass that around.
Nah, I don't think
Rob Carlson.
he knows it too well.
I was lucky enough to get Thursday off work, which is rare for me, and decided, well, I'm going to go out and spend some time on the river since the rain was coming. I mainly brought this because I wanted Dr. Bob to take a look. I was thinking tail vertebrae. I thought mammoth. He said, no, probably sloth. But I said, either way, kind of neat to find one that's a tail. And you find so much dugong out in the rivers. This is actually manatee, because it's much lighter. It's not, you know, the dugong is usually solid rock. So I said anytime you can find a hole in it's kind of cool. But bison teeth, horse teeth, you know, the usual stuff. Lots of glyptodont in this area for some reason. And several big gator osteoderms, which is cool. And strangely enough, a camel tooth that's still white, but it's real heavy and mineralized. So I guess just different mineralization, but random stuff. Beat the rain anyway to get out there and get to it.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you all you guys for bringing stuff in. And we do show and tell each month, well, mainly because all of us want to see what people are finding. And I'm sure Bob's got a LoJack hit on his car right now at some point. But also to show the new folks that you can find this stuff here. You don't have to travel all around the world or crazy places to find. Florida is one of the best places in the country to find fossils, and they're certainly accessible and legal to obtain. And but I can tell you I mean, Bob's a good hunter. Rob's a very good hunter, especially in the invert mines. But the reason these folks that are showing stuff off are finding things is because they're going. They're getting out. You know, you go out hunting twice a year, and you complain that, well, I'm not finding a whole lot. Well, Rob goes out twice a month or more. You know, Joe's going out twice a week sometimes. It seems like, but you know, if you get yourself in the river or creek or scuba dive, snorkel, start digging and screening, you're going to start finding stuff. That's guaranteed. So unless I missed any announcements, which usually my wife says she gives me dirty looks if I did, she's not. So I think I'm good. Our speaker tonight is Doug Woodring. He's a longtime club member. from Pennsylvania. He thinks you don't have an accent. You'll find out shortly that he's wrong. He started off collecting fern fossils up in Pennsylvania, and he graduated. I'll let him explain how he graduated to shark stuff. He's not a professional, but he's certainly an expert. When I say he's not a professional, I mean he's not doesn't have a degree in paleontology of any sort. I think he's some kind of, in some bunkers, the man of a high castle at McDill. He's playing some secret job he's not allowed to talk about. So anyway, welcome Doug Woodring. You're good.
How's that?
I'll run your thing here for
Good.
you.
If this didn't work, I was gonna say that if I don't speak loud enough, I'll just take my hearing aids out and I'll speak louder, so. Anyway, what's that? Yeah, lights. Thanks. I put on a post earlier. I said I was humbled and honored. I really am. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to folks, which about a subject I'm very passionate about. Actually, two subjects, both fossils and scuba diving. So I originally created this presentation, not for the club, it was for a dive shop. And so I took it and I modified it some more for the club, and hopefully you will be entertained and you'll learn some things, and especially for the new members, it kind of help you kind of explain some of these things we talk about sometimes, like why Venice is the shark tooth capital of the world and all that kind of stuff, and why we have such a fossil-rich environment here. Like Mike said, I grew up in the Poconos of Pennsylvania. We're in Allentown, and then moved up there when I was about 5. First time I received a trilobite fossil from a dam that they were building from a friend of my mom. She worked for the conservation district, and the guy gave it to me, and I was hooked. Read every dinosaur book in my 2-stoplight town in the library that they had, which wasn't a lot. And I like dinosaurs. It's not my thing right now, but I do like dinosaurs. But I was hooked then. I have a childlike wonder, and I continue to have a childlike wonder when I go out fossil hunting. So, and you're right, yeah, I do have kind of an accent. So. Anyway, went to Penn State University. I do have a science degree. Got a couple of masters. So I do like to read a lot. A lot of people always ask me, like, oh, how do you know so much about this, that, and the other thing? I said, well, I read a lot of books. So there's a lot of great books out there that you can get. You can get them off Amazon. You can get them here at the club. Anyway, so for this presentation, what I'd like to do is kind of give you some context and history of the state. This will all be very brief segments. I want to leave a lot of time for folks that have questions, especially new members. And then, we'll talk a little bit about fossils. We'll talk about conditions. We'll talk about shore and boat diving, some techniques, some equipment. And then, I was going to say fact versus crap, but facts versus myths for the club. So, because I think as we go through this, I mean, there's a lot of us go out and we screen. Those of us that scuba dive, when I tell people I scuba dive for stuff, I always get the, well, aren't you afraid of this, or aren't you worried about that, or kind of thing. So, anyway, we'll go into some of that and hopefully have a little bit of fun, and then we'll have some time for questions. Most of what I brought here, those of you who had a chance to come up and look, and I think I'll have a chance after the talk to come up and look some more, especially this box here. Everything in this box I've found personally in Venice. This is just the tip of the iceberg, as I like to say. Folks came up to my table at the show and said, "Oh, you have a great collection." I was like, "You have no idea. This is where the sickness begins." Anyway, so next slide, please. So, why is Florida so fossil rich? So, North America, all right? Everybody's familiar with Swanee River, right? Well, it used to be the Swanee Seaway. It used to be actually a split between North America and Florida. So, Florida's a giant sinkhole, right? It's made of limestone. It's a carbonate platform. And shallow tropic seas. And this will come into play a little better. As you see here, this outline, there's the state as it currently exists. As the sea levels rose and fell, you'll see there's a shelf out here at about 300 feet, or excuse me, there's a 300 foot depth that goes goes from 300 feet, drops down to 10,500 feet. So it gets pretty deep, but it takes a long time to get really deep in the Gulf of Mexico. anyway, and you can see there's much less out here. I mean, you can go off Jupiter and you can be 500 feet of water in no time. But this will play into something we'll talk about a little bit through the presentation. Next slide, please. All right, so location, right? All right, so at early separation from North America, here's the glacial chronology on this side. So about 37 million years ago, Florida starts to come up out of the sea, right? We talk about Bone Valley, we talk about the spine of Florida, that starts to come up. You have glacial and interglacial periods. So it's all in, I said it's all in the sand. Who's heard of Pointer Rocks? You guys heard of that? That by Sarasota, right? So the sand, that beautiful award-winning white sand that we have up in Pensacola and all that, okay, Appalachian quartz. It's Appalachian quartz sand. The stuff in Venice is this stuff here, this kind of coarse, darker, and these guys keep that from going north and it keeps this stuff from going south, unless they put the giant dredges offshore and pump tons of sand on the beaches to make it nice for tourists. But anyway, as we go through this, the glacial maximum about 10,000 years ago will be very important because it'll raise some other questions. So next slide, please. All right, marine and land vertebrates together. What? Is that craziness? People always go, well, I found this mammoth tooth out in Venice. How? Why is there a mammoth tooth in the water? You know, I mean, we know why they're in the rivers, right? Because it's washing out of the earth. Why is it out there? Well, those glacial maximums, when the sea levels were much lower, Florida was like 200 miles wider. I mean, and I know we've had some speakers in the past. I can't remember his name. Is it Paige Ladson? Is it Andy? The doctor?
Oh,
Hemmings, yeah. Did that site. He's done like core samples and all that stuff way out in the Gulf, found like evidence of settlements out there. Down in Venice, we've got Native American burial sites. They're buoyed off out of Minnesota. In fact, I know the guy that found the jawbone that started all that, and I think they're around 8 or 12 individuals now, and about 8,000 years old. Pretty cool. But the state's excavating that. Anyway, yeah, and the other thing I was getting is like no dinosaurs, right? So no dinosaurs in Florida, well, except for that piece of turtle they found like 3,000 meters down in core sample. So all that stuff, that strata, is all buried way, way down the dino stuff. Anyway, this is a good friend of mine. He's one of the, I used the charter captain for Aquanet's dive charters. You know, we have this large variety. So we're down in Venice, and I just threw that in there because that was a cool picture. But we're down in Venice. We do find things. I mean, there have been artifacts found offshore. It's kind of weird to find arrowheads out, you know, a mile and a half out in the Gulf. But you do find a wide variety of both marine and land vertebrates out there. I mean, look at all this different stuff. It's probably blasphemous, right? It's not always about the shark teeth, right? So shark teeth are important, triangles are important. However, what I find, I don't care what I find. If I find something cool, it's different. So that would lead me to one of the first things. So, okay, not the professionals in here, so the new guys. Does anybody know what this is? And if you can tell me what it is, or guess what it is, there's maybe a little word. Anybody have any idea?
Piece of the tusk.
Okay, what kind of tusk?
It looks like it's large enough to be a mastodon or mammoth.
Not quite that large.
Then it,
It's a little bit rare.
walrus.
Bingo.
Oh,
There you go. So that is Otencetus emonsi. That is a walrus. That's an extinct walrus. They went from here all the way down. That's very rare. I only know 2 people that have like complete tusks. One of them is Kim Westbury. The other one is David Murphy. But even at that size is very rare for Florida. I'm not a big mammal guy when it comes to fossils. I do get my mammal fix in the Peace River occasionally and down in Venice. A good friend of mine, David Shelley, I found this. Of course, this is a lot cleaner than it was. It took me a while to get, and it still had some seed growth on it, but it wasn't worth messing with anymore. I remember texting him and sent him a picture. I was like, what is this? His words first out of his mouth, or his first text back to me was, I want it. All right, okay, well, what is it? And he said, it's a walrus tusk. And he said, yeah, pretty rare. Find one that chunk that size, and to find them complete. Interesting story about that is I was swimming around and I was in this terrible area. I've got some videos to show later. Terrible area, very shelly, didn't look good at all for fossil areas in Venice. I see off in the distance a rubble pile, and I swim over to it, and there's this thing sticking out, right? So this is the moment where you go, I don't know what it is, but I know it's something. So shove it in my BCD, right, or in one of my bags, like these bags here. Shove it in there and take it up, and then I found out what it was later. So that's one of the big things is, and folks that go out with myself or go out on a dive charters, they'll all tell you, pick everything up, because you never know. So let's see, that's about it for that. Next slide, please. So, Joe, Brandon, I feel you. Very sad for that little cat. I'm not sorry that megalodon is extinct. That went extinct and it died. Apex Miocene predator, right? Big shark. Anybody want to venture how much force the bite of that shark was? I want to guess.
Really hard?
Huh?
Really hard?
Well, yeah, really hard. It's definitely bites your head off, man.
By tons, right?
Huh?
By ton, is it done by tons?
30 tons per square inch.
More? Not that much. Not quite.
100 million.
No, not that. Anyway, 18.2 tons.
Wow.
All right. And so if you're wondering, and these are some really good. So there's a diver. So it might see you, maybe. I mean, you might be a toothpick. There's a juvenile mega, a big infant, or there's a great white, and then the males, and of course, why are the females always bigger? Keep them in line, right? There's an African elephant, so just for scale. This is my biggest personal find. That's a 5.5-inch tooth, and finding that was dumb luck. Swimming along, there was a reef. My wife comes in and she goes, I mean, it wasn't even this big, but she's like, hey, look what I got. I'm like, oh, good job, hon. And it was about, the one she had was probably about like that big. That's a big tooth. Literally swam 20 feet, saw a flash of gray out of my eye, my peripheral vision, and this is a real story, this is not a made up story. Looked in this hole in the reef, and you just kind of go, the first words out of your mouth are, please let it be whole. And I reached in there, I pulled it out. 6 more months or less, and I would not have been able to recognize that tooth. I have some pictures on my phone I can show folks afterwards. You would not realize that that was a shark's tooth in there. It had all kinds of stuff growing. And I'm not just talking about like shells and stuff. I'm talking about like coral and tree-like little things growing on it. So it was really becoming part of the reef. And how it got in that one hole, I don't remember now. But it was pretty fascinating. And it was such an exciting thing to find. And that's part of it, right? It's like the thrill of the hunt. No matter what you're doing, whether you're screening, whether you're diving, snorkeling, whatever, it's the thrill. And to see that, it's just, there's nothing, I didn't even really explain. There's nothing like when you're swimming along and you see that big thing sitting there, or you do, we'll get into some of the techniques that we use, but some fanning, and all of a sudden something emerges from the bottom of the ocean that's just hasn't seen, you're the first person to see that since the animal died, 3.5 to 12, 15 million years ago. So next slide. This is what I was trying to say. So In comparison, a great white shark has 1.8 tons of force. Kind of wimpy, huh? 18.2 tons. If you're wondering what 18.2 tons of force is, I looked it up. So for the dino folks in our club, that which is okay, it'd be like 2 T-Rexes getting dropped on you. About 2.5 elephants getting dropped on you, crushing force. A chunk of the space shuttle falling on you.
Question.
Yes.
How high up would those be dropped on you? Like from how high up?
I don't know.
Probably terminal velocity.
Yeah, probably, yeah. Make sure to hit 125 feet a second. So, yeah. Well, but we're talking about something that would have actually slammed shut. So, same force, but pretty high.
So like they're coming at you from both directions.
That's enough questions.
Remember, he said he's not a scientist.
I am not, no. Well, I did study some physics, but that's a long time ago, and a couple of careers ago too. 20 cows fell on you, that was also, and then 10 cars. So just give you some ideas. Yeah. I think. So there was a gator that used to be. Remember, I guess Gatorland's still there. I don't know. There used to have this guy snapping sand, 2,500 foot-pounds of pressure. Yeah, 2,500 foot-pounds of pressure within a gator bone. So, I would imagine 18.2 tons of force could probably bust through almost anything we would make. Yeah, that's why you see when you see like this piece of whale mandible, a baleen mandible, you see a lot of that chopped. I mean, you see it cut up really bad. I think that's why a lot of stuff is fractured too. Sometimes it's fractured from moving, but I would imagine some of it is from actual biting. And then of course, you know, we have evidence on meg teeth. You can see when there's little scalloped cuts out of the blade of a meg tooth, and that's bite compression damage. Where the tip is dinged a little bit. That's usually bite compression. So, next slide, please. All right. Okay, now we're gonna get a little more into the dive part. So, how many certified scuba divers do we have in here? Oh, that's good. How many people would like to get certified? How many people are apprehensive about getting certified? Okay, that's okay. It's good. Just know that most dive regimens, when you go do it, they're there to maximize what you can do. It's not about what you can't do, it's about what you can do. And they're gonna get you through the course. So don't really worry, you're gonna pass the course, right? Because you just paid this guy $400 or $500 and he wants you to pass the course because he wants you to come back and buy equipment. But, you know, PADI is very much like that. We teach blind people to dive. We teach deaf people to dive. We teach paralyzed people to dive. So it really is, and let's face facts. I watched Neil Armstrong land on the moon. I wanted to be an astronaut. That never happened. It's about the closest thing you're going to get to feeling like being an astronaut. So I highly recommend it. Anyway, so this is expected dive conditions. I did go diving a little with Lacucci once, so this is really about Venice, but I went a little with Lacucci. I think it was like 60-some degrees, and it was great while I was in there, but when I got out, I thought I couldn't feel my hands anymore, and you know. So Venice gets that cold. It's getting warmer now. It's in the 70s probably. So what you're talking about here, winter, not winter, temps and visibility. So in winter, the water is actually clearer because you have less bacteriological and less biological stuff in the water. Venice is very silty, can be. Anybody that's dove in river stuff, you know, sand, that little fine sand gets in everything, right? Gums your gear up. So I mean, you're always cleaning your gear. When I go diving, I tend to not dive much past November just because I'm kind of a cold wimp. I do have a 7-8 millimeter. I have a very thick semi-dry suit, and I've dove it once, and it wasn't fun by the third dive for me. But you do in the wintertime, you get much better visibility, although it's colder. Summertime, the visibility is very dependent on how the winds are coming in, whether they're coming east-west, and you have to watch that very carefully in the winter, in the summer, or in the summer. That's why I said winter, not winter, because you know we all have 2 seasons in Florida, right? Winter and not winter. And I think we're in not winter right now. So. Depth, super easy diving in Venice, right? Talking, I think the deepest I've been, I might have been in 40 feet one time, and that was way out. That was like 2.5 miles out. Most of the time, you're in somewhere between, if you're in the inshore reefs, you're gonna be in 15 to 25 feet of water. If you're out further, you're gonna be somewhere between 25 and 35 feet of water. But typically, I'd say an average is around 32 feet, something like that. The biotopography in Venice, it varies a lot. I mean, you've got areas where there's big sand rows, you've got areas where it's lots of, when we say rubble, we talk about like these clumps of rocks that are all over the place that have been moved around. The other good thing about winter is that's when storms come through, and the storms turn everything up. I've seen some pictures lately that guys have been posting, and there's big sand rows down there now because of these fronts that have come through. I personally saw it after, it was one of the tropical storms. I can't remember which one it was, but it was a couple years ago. And literally, we dove the week before, and it was flat. And if you've ever seen, you got a sand row. It's kind of, there's black sand rows, and you have like this brown silt in between. There's tan silt in between. It was literally, you could see like stripes, right? Silt, black sand row, but they were all flat. After that storm came through, those things were like a foot high. That's how much the bottom changes. And so when the bottom changes like that, it throws a lot of material around. You can go to areas where you typically don't find eggs, or you typically don't find a certain type of fossil. You might find them after a storm, because it's just moved all that stuff around as it digs it out of the clay areas. That's the other thing in Venice is in Venice, it's about, people heard of the boneyard, right? That's about 1.5 miles short of Venice. And actually where I go diving, I don't really dive Venice much. I do a little bit, but I dive mostly off Minnesota, because the teeth there are much more exquisite. The ones at the beach, it's weird. The ones at the beach are all polished and shiny and little, and then if you go out, you find really beautiful, gorgeous big teeth off Minnesota. Venice, people can dive in Venice now a lot more. The boneyard tends to be picked over more, but I mean, I know people that still find good stuff out there. And of course, as they shift sand around, and then a few years ago, they did beach renourishment, which covered up a lot of stuff. Anyway, sea state and weather. Typically, when we go out, we don't dive in more, I don't like diving in more than like a foot seas. It's not about getting in the water, it's about getting back out on the boat. I'm not worried about the boat going somewhere. I'm just worried that the boat is gonna be pitching so much that it's gonna be dangerous to get back up on the boat. Weather can be kind of problematic in the summertime. You have more summer storms, so you have more higher chance of lightning. I mean, I've literally been on the bottom looking for stuff. It's been bright sunshiny day, and then somebody turns the lights out, and you're like, what happened? And you come up, and you're in the middle of a maelstrom, a bad thunderstorm, you know? But they usually blow away pretty quickly, so that's one of the things to be just mindful of. And then the last thing, it wouldn't be a diving talk without talking about critters, right? Everybody knows about the critters we see in the rivers, the gators. We have sharks in Venice. You do have bulls and hammerheads and other kinds of sharks, tigers. You have nurse sharks. I have only seen nurse sharks. I am sure there are other sharks around. I just don't ever see them. Consequently, they don't bother me. I know that bothers some people. I have a little fact versus myth on that. So, and you see all kinds of cool stuff too. I mean, that's the other reason we like diving in Minnesota, is because the reefs down there are more alive. Stuff up in Venice is all hard pan limestone, very similar to the river bottoms. It's kind of what they look like almost. Hard pan limestone reefs, not a lot of sea life on them. But you do see all kinds of other stuff. You see ghost shrimp, you see Jonah crabs, you see, you name it. I mean, you see big grouper, you see all different kinds of stuff on the reefs down there. And then you see the nurse sharks. Somebody posted a nurse shark video not too long ago. I was like, oh, I know exactly where that ledge is, because that's the same nurse shark that sleeps under that same ledge every time. but they're very skittish. And then something you'll learn, and something that always has stuck with me after I got certified, was 95% of all attacks underwater are provoked and defensive in nature. So if you don't poke it, it won't poke you back. So just remember that when you're diving. And there's a lot of stuff. Speaking of bottom topography, I go through probably a skin every 1 to 2 years just because they get ripped out, because there's a lot of sharp rocks, a lot of sea urchins. I personally took 13 urchin spines out of my wife's knee one time because she hit it, and then after that it was like, okay, we're gonna wear rash guards. Even in the summertime, even when you're in like bathing suit weather, you wanna have a rash guard, and because it's not fun. There are jellyfish down there, moon jellies. We've seen pink meanies, which eat other jellyfish. There are sea nettles. Not fun to get stung by those, but it happens. Usually in beginning of fall, so August, September timeframe, jellies come in. It can be kind of daunting. I mean, I've literally gone down an anchor line to where I'm going to start hunting, and you're like avoid, like it's like you're in an X-wing, you're avoiding asteroids. Because some of the moons will be this big around, they'll be huge. Seen them that big. And the bad thing about those is their tentacles can break off, they can still sting you, the little nematocysts. But it's more annoying than it is anything. Next slide, please. Okay. I kind of talked about different areas a little bit already. Okay, so this is people coming out of a shore dive all happy. Never seen that. Usually like this, right? I have a video of me that I'm very much not that happy. I mean, with the heat and all that and getting all your stuff, I mean, once you get all your gear on and you're ready to get for shore diving, like you're ready to get in that water because you need that to cool you off. It is a little more work. I mean, there still is good shore diving in Venice. I prefer boat diving. As I said, the types of fossils you're going to find, I have a really great, we call it a show and tell box. If folks come dive with us, we'll normally have this box out and show this is the kind of stuff you're going to see, because people aren't used to seeing it in that environment. So you want to kind of give them an idea, you know, and anything from dugong rib, and this is probably a little better stuff than most of the time you find. The first time I went diving in Venice, I literally found like a dugong rib, and that's about it. Was not happy, but I persevered, and my wife got certified, so you know, now we do it as a couple, and we love it. So all different kinds of stuff, land vertebrates, marine vertebrates. I mean, we all know the rule on artifacts, so you might come across an artifact down there, but you can dive. There are the flip side of the archaeological site in Venice is that it's also there's a really good fossil area, but of course you can't dive there anymore. And I actually called the Sarasota County archaeologist just to verify like how close you could get. As long as you stay outside the buoys, you're okay, because there are some other areas around there to dive. Safety requirements. So I have it here, but you know, big dive flag, right? Which all the giant yachts ignore. And even if you yell at them, they won't hear you because of their giant engines and their boats. But people, you have to have that. If you're shore diving, you have to carry a float flag with you. The police will stop you. They will come over. They will probably make sure you're okay. And if you're okay and you don't have a float flag, they might write you a citation. We carry oxygen on board. One of the rules is that if you can apply full 100% oxygen to somebody after a dive injury, they have almost certainty of recovery. I get poo-pooed all the time by the dive charters. Well, some of my friends that I call them on that, and they're like, well, we don't, yeah, whatever. We're only in 30 feet of water. You can die in 5 feet of water. I mean, you can have a heart attack. I mean, because there's a lot of strain on your body, and I'm not trying to get shy people away from diving, but but there is extra strain on your body if you have that, you know. Fortunately, I had a very good friend, or a good friend who died underwater, but he had a history of cardiac. So it's always good to get it checked out by, you know, your doctor. Make sure that it's good that you got a clean bill of health from the doc. But in reality, it's fairly easy diving. It's not physically taxing unless you're swimming a lot. The effort. So that's where it kind of gets to the tax part. There's two schools of thought. You can stay in a spot and you can sand. You can dig in the bottom. You know, this is not PADI friendly diving. You don't have to worry about peak performance buoyancy down there. You want to be heavily weighted because you want to be on the bottom and you want to be moving. Not so heavy that you can't get back to the surface, but obviously you want to be more heavily weighted because you want to be able to kind of crawl along the bottom or swim. And the theory is if you swim more and cover more ground, you have a better chance of statistically finding more stuff. I like to dig too. It just depends on the area. If it's an area where there's a lot of rubble, I'll dig around that rubble because stuff collects in that rubble. If I'm in a more sand row area, I'll just go up and down. I just grid the sand rows back and forth, and stuff sometimes will just be laying out. Next slide, please. Okay. I have a video that'll show some of this. Sanding basically is just what it sounds like, right? A fan, like taking your hand and sweeping it, and you're moving material, right? And literally, some area I can take you to, the teeth will just be popping out of the bottom. I know it sounds like, we have an area called Awesome, because it's easy to find really nice small teeth there. If you like jewelry grade small teeth, you'll find tons of them. You don't always find a lot of megs, but we've been managing to get a lot more megs out of there lately. Cruising, it's just what it sounds like. You just kind of swim along, you're scanning the bottom side to side as you're going, right? So this is something that's really important to talk about. So Venice is not, at least first time as you go, you might dive with a buddy, and then you'll realize like how terrible that is, because if you're in an area where you're trying to fan, you're just gonna gunk up the area for everybody. So one of the things we do is we practice self-reliant diving. So we carry a little pony bottle. So I don't dive with a dive buddy. We're all within maybe 150 to 300 feet of the boat in an area, and we're swimming around, and we all come up at a certain time, and usually everything's a-okay. I haven't had any problems, but we have more recently started carrying pony bottles just in case, because your dive gear can malfunction if you don't maintain it properly, or even if you maintain it properly, it can malfunction. I had a very good friend of mine. I was like, hey, when's the last time you had a reg service? And he goes, oh, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago. I was like, are you crazy? You know, I mean, we get our stuff. I just got mine back from the dive shop today. You get them serviced every year. It's you're in the water. It's not your normal breathing environment. You want to make sure your life support gear is top notch and up to par. So, next slide, please. Okay, I just throw this just so people have an idea, and then I brought some stuff up here which you're all welcome to look at. That's that pony bottle I was talking about. Catch bags. If you're gonna find stuff, you need things to put them in. So normally, like on my BCD, you got a couple of D-rings here. You put these catch bags. Pretty standard mesh ones. Those are my favorites. Unfortunately, they don't really make those anymore. I bought a bunch and they stopped making them. The other one kind of has like a Velcro clasp on it, and I don't really like that because it's hard to do. So that becomes my ballast bag. So I'll go down there, pick up turtle shell, dugong rib and stuff, stick it in there, and keep me down. Compass is very important. So in Venice, especially. A friend of mine went diving, and I was like, okay, you want to go here, you want to go this direction, you want to swim this way. Went down, comes up, what'd you find? I didn't find anything. Would you go the way I told you? Oh no. Oh, okay. Why you didn't find anything? But it's really important with the compass, not only just the directions to find stuff, but you want to know kind of where you are in relation to the boat. You typically don't want to come back up and behind the boat, especially if you got some seas. It could push you further out, makes it harder to swim to the boat. So you typically like to come up in front of the boat if you can. Weight's really important. Overweighted in Venice. Like I said, it's not that peak performance buoyancy that they teach most diving. Dive tool is very important. I've seen all different kinds. A knife, certainly. I was swimming along one time, and I felt this thing, and what is this? Well, this guy Joe would tether himself to the anchor line because he didn't want to. He would go want to get away from the anchor line, but he didn't feel like he could get himself back. His line had wrapped itself around my leg in the back here. So it was good to have a knife or something. You gotta get cut. Luckily, I was able to undo it, but it was aggravating. And there's all kinds of other stuff too. There's some areas where there's this really one scary part in Venice where you go diving and all of a sudden this 40-foot container comes out of the dark. It's a little spooky, is all I'm saying. But you can get in areas when you're diving, and not just for shark teeth, where you have the potential to get hung up on something, and it's always good to have a dive tool. Also good to have a dive tool. I found this thing one time, and I know you guys can all relate that the digging rivers, and I'm sure Bob can relate. You find something and you start digging around it, and it's like in Venice it's worse because it's like in the clay and it's like sucked into that clay. I literally dug like probably a half a whale skull out of this thing, and then I carried it around for the rest of the dive. But I mean, it was big and heavy, but it's like I'm getting at it, I'm like, oh, I know there's something here. What is it? What is it? What is it? And it popped up finally. Floats and lift bags. We don't really use them. I use floats every once in a while because sometimes I'll hit a really hot area. And then it's good to have a little float. You just pop it up, go back over there, mark the spot, and we know to go back there next time. Flags, enough said about that. Dive flags, big one on the boat, even though they're invisible, apparently. Tanks and spare air, standard aluminum 80s, what we use in Venice, aluminum 80 cubic inch or 80 cubic aluminums. And we get probably an hour and a half on a dive on an 80. So it's very, very easy. And the more you do it, it's kind of like most things that you do, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get, the more relaxed you get, the longer your air lasts. First time you go down there, you might burn through an air tank in 30 minutes. But the next time, as you get more used to it, I'm very comfortable with the environment. That's the other thing. I mean, the first couple times you go down, you might, it's a new thing, right? So you just kind of, you get spooked every once in a while. I don't like when things touch me. And so sometimes when I'm down there, and then you got pinfish, you got all kinds of little critters. Love it when you stir the bottom up because you stir all their food up, right? Let's see. Gloves are important. So the kind we use most of the time is these half finger gloves, like weightlifting gloves. They last for a little bit. But you use those because you want your fingertips, right? When you come up here, I don't mind you touching some of this stuff. You feel it, the enamel and all that, it's smooth, right? But you want to have that tactile feel because sometimes if the visibility is not so good, I mean, I literally stuck my hand in like a pile of clay goo and pulled like little Jack Horner and pulled a meg out. But you feel something, so you're using a lot, you're using your eyes and you're using your tactile sense a lot. And especially if you're cruising, your hands, as you're cruising, it's kind of weird. You get in this zone and your hands just keep moving back and forth and you're just constantly touching stuff as you see it. Let's see. Rash guards, I talked about that. You want to make sure you protect it from urchins and get cut on rocks and stuff like that. If you bleed down there, don't worry. There's not going to be a horde of sharks attacking you. Wetsuits. Depending on how susceptible you are to cold, this is a Henderson Fire Fleece 3mm. I wear that in the spring. I wear a rash guard in the summer, and then I maybe get up to a 5mm in the winter. As we get towards the fall. It just depends on how fast the temperature's dropping. And masks are a personal choice. You got different kinds. You got these full face masks, which I've tried those. They're okay. You get regular masks, but ultimately in dive gear, especially, is what's comfortable. It doesn't have to be the most expensive. It doesn't have to be the best quality. If it feels good and it works good for you, it's good gear. And then zip ties, like mammoth tusks, right? I always keep zip ties on there, not only for gear failures, but in case you find some big chunk of fossil. The good news about Venice is typically most of our mammoth stuff down there tends to be very well mineralized. Even the tusk is pretty good, but the problem is you're trying to rig that big thing up from the bottom, and you always run the risk of fracturing it. They found a couple of really nice tusks last year, I believe, down there on the Aquanuts. Next slide, please. Okay, I told you about the facts versus myths. So before we start on this, who can tell, the question I get asked the most is, aren't you afraid of sharks? And my answer is no. So who can tell me how many shark attacks, how many unprovoked sharks attacks have there been in Sarasota County since 1882?
Since 1882?
Yep,
Where?
Sarasota County. We're Venice.
7.
Wow! That's exactly right. That's in the shark, that's in the Florida, the university's shark attack file. When they do that, they do that shark attack file. 7. 7, guys. So sharks are, they're there, but they're not gonna leave. So I looked up some shark facts and myths. Okay? Sharks are hungry man-eaters looking for any chance to attack. No, they're not hunting us. Poor water visibility or inquisitive bites. Now granted, if it's an inquisitive bite, it's gonna hurt. Depending on the shark, right? I mean, even a nurse shark, which is a very timid and docile shark, if provoked, will bite. And the bad thing about nurse sharks is their teeth kind of point inwards, and so if they grab onto you, it's very hard to get them off of you. Sharks are all the same. No, there's actually about 500 shark species. But, and unfortunately we have all 3 of these in our area. The white, tiger, and bull are responsible for the majority of all bites. When Dr. Hubble was here and gave us the shark class, one thing I remember about him was he would say, people would say that there were no great whites in the Gulf. And no, BS. So, if you go look, this is a great organization. They radio tag all these sharks, all these great whites, and you can track them. There's Scott and Rose, I think, are off our coast right now.
Yeah.
So they're out there. If a shark attack has not occurred, it means they do not live in that area. Fact, they inhabit all areas of the ocean. That's why I said, I know there are sharks out there when I'm diving, and I just didn't see them. Now, when I was diving last year and I saw that barracuda, I watched that barracuda the whole time till it left my area, because it was a lot scarier than a shark I ever saw. It had a mouthful of teeth, and they move fast. Sharks are the ultimate and unsurpassed predator. So they are the apex predator in their environment, right? So you go in the water, guess what? You're no longer at the top of the food chain. However, we are their greatest threat. And that's one of the reasons I support this organization too. I'm sort of plugging them, but I did for my birthday this year, I did how Facebook does the charity thing. So thank you for those that contributed, raised $231 for the organization. They do a lot of great work. I mean, they're really trying to help these animals. I mean, they're magnificent creatures. If you study sharks, I mean, yeah, are they the perfect predator? Pretty close. I mean, they've been honed over 400 million years, and they do things really good. They eat and swim and make baby sharks. Yeah. But one of the things, shark fin, right? Shark fin soup. That is like, there's no reason to do that. It doesn't have any value, that soup. Anyway, that's enough of a soapbox. But yeah, I mean, I think sharks are so cool. I mean, they're like many creatures that are predators. They're misunderstood, right? We tend to project on things like, oh, it's a man-eater, or a gator attacked such. Well, yeah, it's an animal. I mean, a small dog or something like that. And it's terrible and tragic that happened, but it's the animal's instinct. And you know what the other thing is? And I was going through this, what I thought was really interesting. So one of the things I really want to do is my bucket list is shark cage diving. Probably one of the worst things that's being done in the industry, because guess what they care about? They put you in that cage, they want you to see sharks. And what do? They chum the water. So now that animal associates food with human beings. And that's why we have the problem with gators and stuff too. Anyway, next slide. Oh, here's the obligatory joke. I looked up some shark jokes, but they were all terrible. There were no fossil shark jokes. The best one was, what does it mean when a paleontologist and a fossil are in a relationship? You're carbon dating. Yeah, it's some real stinkers, guys. Really stinkers. Next. Okay, I'm gonna open it up to, well, I'll tell you what, can we X out of this and see if I can play some videos? So I just wanna kinda give you guys just a few, just to show you what it looks like. What it should be in the same file folder as this presentation. Oh, is it?
Yeah.
It might be already. Yeah. Yeah. This dude dug over the side. This is what it is like getting in the water. Oops. Why is it gone? That really should be the. So pretend it's this one. That's me. That's me and my bald head. I'm getting bald head. My dad's bald spot.
Bald is.
Here's a.
No hate.
And you're not 60, you're 58. I got the thing from Facebook the other day. Let's see, whatever. Oh, Dave help. That one's twisted too.
They're on the side, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why it's on the side. So these are some that my wife sent to me. And so that's me. That's what it looks like really after short diving. Right?
How was your time though? You're on video. How was it?
Was it bad?
Yeah, it was terrible.
It wasn't great. Probably once I get past the reef, past the seagrass and stuff, it probably 3 feet maybe.
Okay.
About that. And then it was so 3 feet of visibility. It's not bad. But it wasn't bad. 3 feet's good. I would have got one. Okay, let's see what's another one.
Yeah, we have 2 more, 3 more.
Let's see. No, these are actually all videos. Yeah, let's do. I'm covering the mammoth. This should show you fanning. Why is that not? Maybe you can't play that format?
It sounds so peaceful. Yeah, I miss that sound.
Oh, that's weird. It's playing the soundtrack, not the. Sorry folks, I don't know why it did that. Play that one. This is Pat Gould. He's helped me. This is our property up in with Akuchi. So you see that ooky black water? It looks like really scary. Well, it was pretty steep getting down there, and it was. I think it was in the 50s or 50s that day. It was really cold. Really cold. It was in January 2 years ago. That's me. My wife calls that my ant hat.
Get
With
out
like
of
an
there.
ant. With an antenna on. This is a little spring in front of their house, or in the back of their house. They wanted me to check out. I found some Urbantonian, some little mammoth pieces. I found a piece of flake or something. Not much. Dave Latassi was there actually that day too with me. I don't know if you guys know Dr. Dave. Anyway, so, and then when I came out of the water, that's when I really started to shiver. So, let's see what's. That's another. I really apologize. I thought I had these set up okay. I guess it could. I guess maybe it could be maybe they can't handle the format. I think some of these are. These are action video.
Quickly, you could download VLC player and it'll have the codecs built in, but you know we're.
Yeah. That's swimming out. That's the other thing. There's a lot of swimming in shore diving. And I mean, the easier way would be to just go on the bottom, I guess. But then if you're like me, it's like I want all my gear for fossil hunting, not for swimming. So anyway, okay. So we'll go back to this. Back to questions. That's a real tooth. That tooth was found by my friend Mike from Aquanuts. That's me holding it. He found that on Father's Day like 3-4 years ago. That is a 6.18 inch museum quality megalodon, golden beach color. It doesn't get much better than that. he needed some new motors on a boat. He actually sold that tooth for $9,000. Wow. Well, he's in the business of being in business. Not, I would never have sold that tooth. Ever, but you know. And then somebody on Facebook stole that picture and they tried to sell something claiming to be that tooth, and called the guy out on that because scams are alive and well. Anyway, so that's my whole presentation. I hope you found it informative, and happy to take any questions.
Got a quick question for you. Have you ever used the dive masks that have the lower magnifiers for some of us that need glasses to see?
So, how bad is your how bad?
I'm wearing trifocals at this point, so.
My advice to you, Eileen could probably back up with this, and her husband, would be probably to seek prescription scuba masks.
Go ahead and get the prescription.
Yeah, everything's magnified 33 times. So if you just use cheaters to read, I mean, you're gonna be fine. I wear bifocals. I literally can pick up shark teeth on the bottom that are not any bigger than that. And I asked my doctor about it, and she said I know the shape's in my head, so muscle memory. Yes, ma'am?
I actually got prescription ones that fit in the bottom of my goggles, and I only got them for the
They do have inserts. They have inserts as well.
Yeah, they have inserts that you put with your prescription, and they go in there. Then you can take them out. You don't have to.
Yeah. Did they stay in pretty well?
Yeah, they stay in really
Okay.
well. They stay in.
So that's an option too. That'd be cheaper than getting actually like prescription glasses.
Right.
Paul.
You're from Pennsylvania,
I am.
and it's quite a bit the same between California and Pennsylvania. La Brea is a oil seep. Pennsylvania oil seep.
It is.
Why do you think that we haven't found a La Brea type situation in Pennsylvania?
I think it's because it's different epoch.
Well, I mean,
The
you know,
ice
the
age
oil
stuff isn't
seeps up to
exposed
the,
as well there.
Right.
yeah, oil seeps up to the ground.
Most of what we get is all like Permian, like ferns. We get
Much deeper.
much older sediments. Because that side of the Appalachians are much older than the Rockies.
But wouldn't oil come up to the surface, catch water on it, just like you had the situation in La Brea, and animals come to that?
You would think, but we don't really have tar pits in Pennsylvania. I mean, we don't have that I know of. You know, and there's only a certain part of Pennsylvania that it's not. The oil deposits aren't quite as extensive as they are in California.
Oil City, there's some oil coming up out of the surface on Oil City.
Yeah.
But that's the other side of the Appalachians. That's
Right.
most of the Ohio.
Right, but yeah, I'm not as familiar with any tar pits in that part of the country. And that
I think also epoch-wise it's Denovian, and then as it's Denovian, it's like slate.
Yeah, so you get ferns, you get crinoids a lot. That's a big marine thing you get there is crinoids. As I lived in the area where you would get a lot of that stuff. I mean, literally, we could go up on this mountain, Mount Pisgah, and you would just walk around, and there was slate shale everywhere, and you just kind of like you had the Green River, you just crack one, and there'd be a fern, you know. And that's what we did for science class. So, but I know that's a great question. I would imagine it's a lot like, so why don't we find hardly any great whites in Venice when we find shark teeth? We don't. They're very rare. I know people have dove in 1,000 dives. They found 10 great whites. I've found 2 or 3 little ones. Just not very common. But you go the next county up, the Manatee, and you'll find them all over the place.
Yeah, once the eggs were gone, their whites exploded.
Yeah, and probably that, plus it probably has a lot. I think I've asked Dr. Holbert the same question, and it's a lot of it has to do with deposition as well. I mean, where the actual strata went. But yeah, I mean, I would agree. If there were great whites around when Megs were around, the great whites would probably not be near them because Megs would have eaten all the whites. I mean, you talk about an animal that's eating something like 75 tons of food a day. I mean, eight whales whole.
What year did you graduate Penn State?
1985.
Oh,
You guys have the same accent, by the way.
I graduated Penn State in 1985, and then I immediately went and got my commission in the Navy, so.
Yeah, I was there in 77, 73, 77, so a lot older than you.
More questions?
I got one quick one. What's it the best technique or the best product you use to keep your mask from fogging up?
I personally like the stuff called Jaws Spit. It's I mean, you can use baby shampoo. A lot of people use that. But Jaws Spit to me tends to, I put in once and I do 3 dives, and I don't have to put it in again. I'm just one time. My wife, she's like, it does it every time. I don't know why. I keep telling her you don't have to, but that's just what her thing is. She wants to make sure it's not fogging. But I've used it for 3 dives. The most I've ever done is 4 dives, and then usually by the 4th dive, I get the little. I have to decompress for about
You can get that
a minute, 10 feet.
Most dive shops.
Yeah, it's very common. I order it from Amazon. It's usually cheaper to just get it from Amazon. But Jaws, they sell it in both like a gel, which the one I prefer. It coats better, and then they also have a spray.
It's the gold gel. That one's pretty good.
There's one that's like Aqua Frog or something. And there's a bunch of different ones. I mean, they're honestly baby shampoo works. It's just you're breaking that surface tension. So, and the other big thing too is with a mask is you want to make sure that you've you know, when they come from the factory, you need to use either like toothpaste or something. You need to clean. There's like a coating on that on the lenses that you need to clean off.
Right.
Any other questions? Oh, no, go ahead, sir.
Gotta ask. I don't have any problem with sharks growing up here, but as a generational Floridian, it's been ingrained in me to be very wary of going into a tannic river.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wondering what the thinking is with you guys diving in the rivers and.
Well, I typically go in the wintertime, like the dry season, and it tends to be colder. The animals tend to be more sluggish.
Sure.
I also make sure that I look around really well. So say I've been in the Manatee River, right? I've seen a lot of slides, but I really haven't seen very many gators in the wintertime. But I mean, I know they're there because I've talked to the locals, and they said, yeah. I mean, if you're in a freshwater, well, but you're in any place there's fresh water in Florida, right? You gotta assume that there might be a gator in there. But typically, you're larger than them, and so they tend to not, they're an ambush predator anyway. I think they tend to not just. I do know people that have been grabbed by.
Oh, some of them, yeah. People have been bit.
Yeah.
They don't bother you.
But I know people that have also come up face to face with them. And I don't know if you have, or face to face right in the river.
There have David Quammen, Monsters of God or whatever in a book, but he talks about the search pattern for all types of carnivores or monsters, from tigers and everything else. And a gator, which has a brain about this big, like the size of a walnut, almost like that, it has a very, very specific search pattern for hunting, and getting in or getting out, but mostly getting into the water. So if you're looking around, that's the most chance. And when you look at when people they're doing stupid stuff, like he said, poking them, feeding them, doing stuff so if you looked around and, okay, there's a gator in the water, oh, better not dive here today or whatever. So typically, if you're careful getting in, it's really gonna cut down your chances. And the only time I really came close recently, which is in my book, was I got in a bad situation where my regulator got pulled out of my mouth, and I had a lot of weight on, so couldn't get up. And by the time I finally struggled to the surface, and whatever, there was a water moccasin there, so I put my regulator back in and dropped back down. But through all that struggle, apparently a gator was somewhere in the area, and again, that fit his search pattern, struggling animal in the water, and came over and checked me out, but still didn't attempt to bite me or anything else. It just kind of came over as I landed on the bottom again. I'm like, okay, this is not cool, because I just got out of running out of air. I just got out of a water moccasin. Now I have a gator to deal with.
Plus, they're somewhat territorial as well,
Yeah,
so they're gonna be interested. Why are you in my spot?
And in the rivers, the winter time, the water's way clearer because it's colder. You have less algae. The animals are sluggish. It's not time for them to go in. They're trying to sit and warm themselves on them. So I have not dived for over 30 years now, maybe 10 times. I've even seen a gator, and maybe 3 or 4 times had one relatively close to me.
I mean, I've been in a situation in a piece where I've been about Chula, and I've seen one, and it's there, and then all of a sudden it goes boop, and it goes in the water, and it makes me a little uneasy. But I mean, that's kind of like a human reptile thing too, right?
Well, people tell the stories because they're remarkable. Like Bob said, we've been, between me and him, my wife, we probably dove 3,000 times.
Right.
I've seen the gator a couple times, and Paul in here tricked me into grabbing one time on the water. And even when you grab them, they don't even scare the mess out of you, they just leave.
I want to hear that conversation. I want to hear that.
I do have one gator story. I was a good friend of mine. A friend of mine is a pitcher with the Phillies, and he comes out and goes fossil hunting. And so I took him one time, and I took him to this land site, and there was a big pond, and we were talking, and I said, I literally did not get the words out of my mouth that, I had never seen a gator here. And one flushed right next to me, and I must have jumped 4 foot sideways. But, I think the important thing in all of this is that you need to be aware of your surroundings, right? It's like anything. I mean, walk down Ybor City at night, you better be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I'd rather get in a river than do that.
But yeah, probably.
Like I said, those stories are remarkable. We very little. Nobody in our club has ever been big. There's people who've been big, and when they tell us where they were, we expect them to get big. Where they were, Lake Russo,
Lake Hancock. Lake Hancock.
Hey, Lake Hancock.
Oh my God! I would never go in Lake Hancock anyway because it's a cesspool.
Yeah.
So
the shark thing, and it's. I don't dive in the salt water a lot. I've never seen a shark. I've never even been lucky enough to see one.
I've literally only seen the ones I've seen. The nurse sharks I've seen, I've only seen them in the past couple of years.
I gotta say, I'm surprised to hear that because I've seen plenty of sharks.
But they're they're very you gotta remember, sharks are very skittish, shy creatures.
They don't mess with you.
Yeah, and they don't know you're not what they want. When you're down there, bubbles are coming out of you and stuff. I think gators the same way when it's bubbles coming out of you. They don't want to be messing with that.
Glad you focus on the teeth.
Another question? One last?
Two. At that map from earlier, like showing Florida, it's like different versions throughout
sizes, yeah.
So like, is it safe to say, like, hypothetically, like the majority of Florida could be like a fossil bed?
Oh, it is a fossil bed.
Like,
it is. The
so
carbon.
basically-
The fact that it's got a carbonate base that's the old seabed.
So
marine shells,
Yeah.
the whole state is a fossil.
Yes.
So hypothetically, if you dug deep enough anywhere,
If you dig, if you dig 18 to 30 feet in the ground in Florida, you're probably going to hit fossils.
Some kind.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there's a definitive pattern. You got overburden. You hit a shell layer. You hit a fossil layer.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
So that's why when you go to like the mines and stuff, since they're already down that far to get the fossil, you're able to find all of it.
They remove the hard stuff for you.
Yeah, they do.
Gotcha. Okay.
Sir, you had a question. Did you have a question, sir?
Lawrence had a question in the back.
Oh, yeah.
Here's a question that's always been burning in my mind. Who do you think would win in a fight, a shark or an alligator?
That's a good question, honestly. I mean, the shark has the advantage in teeth, but the gator has the tough hide, and the gator has the advantage if it clamps down on it, it's gonna probably crush. The sharks aren't, I mean, they're just cartilage, mostly. I mean, except for the vertebra and the teeth.
A lot of alligators beat other alligators.
Yeah.
Any other?
In the river, it would be the alligator. If it was out in the ocean, the shark.
I think there's a silent movie about that.
I know they get them with the pythons. But any other questions? Thank you all. We also have a skit. Lawrence, if you've been here before, if you haven't, Lawrence and Katora do skits for us most months. They're usually funny. They're always funny. They're always funny.
Well, since it's coming up on one of my favorite holidays, Easter, I figured why not celebrate the animals that help bring us Easter eggs, specifically birds. To be more clear, giant birds. They played a large part in human culture over the years, with stories of birds being taller than a man, with those said to have talons so big they could carry a person off to their nest. But the birds I'm talking about don't fly at all. They're all extinct, but they're still fascinating. These are my top 5 favorite giant extinct birds. Number 5, Gastornis. Also known as Diatrima, this bird was named after Gaston Plant, who found the first fossils in France in 1855, with later fossils being found in Germany, China, and North America. With large skulls equipped with massive beaks, Gastornis reached about 6 feet 7 inches in height. Brought tape measures just to show you just how big these birds could get. Right here. In many older books, like those from the 50s through the 1980s, you would often see this bird depicted as a ferocious predator chasing after early mammals like horses. But recent isotope studies of its bones suggest that this animal was more herbivorous than carnivorous. And when you think about it, its beak is more designed to shear off vegetation and crack nuts than bite through bone. And its legs are too chunky anyway for it to be a fast runner. But while that bird definitely probably wasn't a predator, this next bird probably was. Number 4, the forest raccoons, better known as the terror birds. These monsters literally terrorized South America throughout much of the age of mammals. The largest species collected also had the largest skull, reaching 21 inches in length of any bird. This one here is Titanus. I know it's not as cool looking as the one in Dr. Bob's book, but we tried. It was one of the few South American animals to cross over into North America during the Great Final Interchange with the formation of the Isthmus of Panama. It had sharp talons on its feet, and like modern birds of prey, had a hooked beak. These were fast runners, capable of reaching speeds up to 30 miles per hour. And they provided some fierce competition for the weird mammalian predators that lived in South America during the time. So, while the birds hunted the open plains, the mammals wisely stuck to the shadows deep within the forest. Turn the page here. You stapled it too tightly. Okay, here we go. Now, the terror bird's reign of terror ended about 1.8 million years ago, around the start of the Ice Age, just before humans showed up. Lucky them, huh? Or lucky us. But their closest living relatives still exist in South America today. They're the Seriyama birds, and they actually have claws like a dromaeosaur. We've actually seen them at Lowry Park Zoo within the aviary section.
Oedipus gardens.
Yeah. Now let's head down under to good old Australia to meet the Thunderbirds at number 3. And no, I'm not talking about the native bird in Indian culture or the cool Ford car that was named after it. I'm talking about the strange birds that were related to ducks and geese that roamed Australia throughout the Cenozoic. They go by many names: thunderbirds, meharungs, or my personal favorite, the demon ducks of doom. This one here is Jenny Ornis, which reached about 7 feet high. But the largest drum ornis grew up to 9 feet 10 inches high, making it one of the largest birds to exist. So let's see. Here's 7 feet. Now if I can get this to cooperate. 10. Yeah, imagine running into one of those in the barnyard. Now, like many other prehistoric creatures, we don't know much about the diet of these giant birds. Some people say that they're carnivorous, others say they're herbivorous, and others say they were a bit of both. My opinion is that if they were anything like modern waterfowl, their diet probably would have consisted mostly of plants, but they probably would have eaten small animals too. These strange massive birds disappeared around 30,000 years ago, right around the time that the Aborigines started colonizing Australia. And now zipping over to another island, we go to New Zealand. At number 2, the moas. Now, if you haven't been to New Zealand, they're literally a bird's world. Before people arrived with their domestic animals, birds dominated nearly every ecological role in this part of Polynesia. Many lost their ability to fly like the kakapo and the kiwi, and some grew into giants like the moas. There are about 9 species in total, scattered about both on the North and South Islands. The largest one here, Dinornis, were the tallest birds that ever existed. Most of the time they held their necks straight out like this, feeding on low-growing plants. But when they extended their necks straight upwards, they could reach 12 feet in height, making them the tallest birds in the world. By comparison, the bush moas were only about a little larger than turkeys. But as well as being flightless, another interesting thing about the moas is that they didn't have wings either. They had evolved to the point where they had lost all traces of wings on their skeleton, not even vestigial wings. So they were wingless and flightless. After the arrival of the Maori people on the islands, the moas were of course rapidly hunted into extinction. But that doesn't mean it was easy for them to be hunted. Some stories say that as the moas were hunted, they would lash out with fierce kicks, and the Maoris would have to use special ropes to trip them up. The last species, the smaller upland moa, vanished in the 15th century, just before Europeans colonized New Zealand. And so after the tallest bird in the world, what could be next? Well, guess what? This one also comes from an island, the island of Madagascar, the elephant birds, at number 1. Now you may know Madagascar for its lemurs, chameleons, and tenrecs, but it was also once home to the heaviest birds that ever existed. This one, Apiornis, the best known, weighed up to 1,200 pounds. A close cousin, Varombe, named after the native Malagasy word for these birds, was even heavier at 1,600 pounds. The elephant birds reached heights of 9 feet 8 inches, but didn't receive their name from their size, but from stories passed down from Middle Eastern cultures to the great explorer Marco Polo about an enormous eagle-like bird that was strong enough to lift full-grown elephants into the air and kill them by dropping them at great height. You may know it as the rook or rog from the voyages of Sinbad's stories. In actuality, the elephant birds were herbivores, feeding on fallen fruit and leaves on the forest floor. But what these birds are most well known for are their eggs, which were the largest in the world, about 100 times bigger than chicken eggs, and even bigger than the eggs laid by sauropod dinosaurs, which are only about the size of grapefruits by comparison. The elephant birds died up very recently, around 1,000 years ago in the 11th century, due of course to human disturbance. In fact, there is evidence that people did hunt these birds and even used the shells of their eggs as bowls. In fact, an egg that size could probably keep you well fed for a good long while. Now, all these birds have one thing in common aside from being flightless. They all lived within the age of mammals, and some of them were unfortunate enough to run into humans. But if you think that the Cenozoic was the only time giant birds existed, you're wrong. If you were to go back into the age of dinosaurs, the closest relatives of birds, you would find many different forms, including flightless ones. There were 5-foot ones that swam in the seas that lived like penguins. And one, found in France, grew up to the size between a cassowary and an ostrich. This is Gargantuabus, the largest known bird of the Mesozoic. Unfortunately, we only have a few bones of it, so its appearance is still speculative. But it's amazing to think that there were ostrich-sized birds living at a time when dinosaurs were still wandering around. And who knows, with many more new fossil discoveries, we might find more examples of giant birds living alongside their dino cousins. Thank you.